Chapter 3. Shopping Wax Bottle Candies. Once upon a time, the ugly girl who crawled back out to sea allowed the current to carry her. But she was never truly there. She messed up her chance with the beautiful stranger on the shore, so she allowed her mind to drift, her physical body disappearing, arms and legs moving mechanically to barely keep her afloat as she dreamed about what she yearned for most in the world, but was positive that she couldn't have: love. She allowed herself to think back to the beautiful stranger. She imagined his face, what his body looked like, sans clothes. They hadn't gotten to know each other enough for her to know his personality, so she went with what she wished for in a man, using his body as a puppet in which to play out her fantasies. The longer she thought about him, the blurrier his face became. He morphed into what she wished him to be: a clay man molded to perfection, designed just for her. She fell in love with his image and of her conquest. Memories and fantasies merged, confounding her reality. She loved her mind man so much. It gave her the confidence in her mind to be supernaturally amazing, strong, sure, and sexy. In short, everything she felt she wasn't in reality. Her mind man understood her body and soul. He was learned and gorgeous and knew what she needed when her eyes linked with his. Sometimes her mind man would be there only to appreciate her from a distance as she excelled in whatever task she was doing. She would bask in the sunlight of her own admired achievements and in her mind man's undivided attention and admiration. So concerned was she with the action in her mind, she didn't notice when a storm was approaching until it broke all around her, angering her with impatience, ripping her out of her mind, forcing her to attend to her physical presence. She would inevitably force herself into her mind again to be with her savior, doing only the bare minimum to survive. Occasionally, she would dive down into the sea for the calm of the underworld, so she could think in peace. When she was forced to deal with reality, even for a moment, she was frustrated to realize that her reality never attained the lofty status of her dreams. Whenever the sea calmed down, so would she, so she could return to living in her mind in peace. I am not always the most practical or realistic person. Most of my living occurs in my head, which is to say that I'm really not physically living at all. I just often think about living. My mental living very often is not realistic or manageable in the physical world anyway, like successfully beating someone up with that person never even attempting to fight back. But that sure as hell doesn't stop me from thinking about it. Part of the reason that I tried to live in my head is because I had no self-confidence that there was any way that I could be as amazing and skilled as I am in my daydreams. But part of it is that I like to turn a blind eye to anything that remotely makes me uncomfortable or inconveniences me in any way at all, especially if it burdens me with some type of expectation or responsibility. I don't want to deal with it, so I pretend that it isn't there. This mimicry of living mirrors and affects my external reality. If you feel really excited or angry in your daydreams, your body reacts to those emotions. And those emotions, along with their potential physical or vocal manifestations, such as a flushed face and rapid breathing, can all occur in reality too, without any external cause. Essentially, you allowed your mind to dictate your reality. It's kind of similar to if you masturbate often. Constantly performing the physical actions that masturbators do will cause you to develop that muscle memory. So when you're out and about, you may just end up doing something that masturbators do without even realizing it, or even having the urges to do so, just because you made it a habit. You are my chronic masturbation tool, though I'd be lying if I told you that you were my only one. Now that sounds unfair, yet again. How dare I be obsessed with you, but have had others before and even after you? The gall. But there it is, the bare naked truth. I see no point in lying to you, so I won't. At least, not on purpose. To explain my mental infidelity, I have to clarify some things about me. As far back as elementary school, I thought that I had my life and my future all figured out. I knew what I wanted out of life, and I even set myself a timeline when all these goals would be accomplished by. I never thought about the journey, the means by which these events would occur. I just expected them to unfurl because they were supposed to happen. And that was that. One of those many goals, besides graduating from college and moving out into my own house by the age of 20, was to marry the love of my life and to start a family. Now, besides the timeline being a potential issue, there really is nothing inherently wrong with that. But with me, the queen of extremes, it very much can be. I don't remember quite who was the first mind man, but one of the earliest ones was definitely in elementary school. My mind was more platonic back then, as it should be at age 5, but the process that I employed then is similar in principle to the one I do now. This particular boy was a very popular and cute young man, but for some reason, I always liked a little bit of the devil in a good person, and he seemed to have that going for him with his bouncy mushroom haircut and overdone dodgeball moves. He was an obvious choice. He would be my husband someday. That, of course, doesn't seem like I put much thought in the matter, but I have to give myself credit where credit is due. I did go about this intellectually, though a shortcoming is that I never tested it out in practice. In this case, as with many others, I needed to observe him, to fast forward my mind into the future and to see if I could stand his quirks, see his personality profile, and generally determine our compatibility based on what I could see and the impressions I would get from his actions and inactions. In reality, then, I saw him as a potential husband. I considered myself back then, as I do now, a one-man type of woman. I don't want to mess up and pick the wrong person, waste my time, discourage myself. So I would take it slow and chew on all the information that I could gather in my mind to determine if I could make this work or not. Slow and steady wins the race is how I operate. With everything, even when I don't want to go slow. It's more important to me that I don't make a mistake. I held on to this particular boy, ruminating over his husband-worthiness in my mind for several years, as I can be loyal like no one else. However, my family and I moved away from our old home, and that slimmed the chance that we would ever be together. Time did the rest, and there was no point in holding on, so I did my best to move on. This process is pretty much how I handle everyone in my wax bottle collection. I'm like Anubis. I weigh hearts and judge accordingly. Unlike him, it's not as easy as busting out a scale and slapping that dead heart on there to see where that soul should end up. I mainly stuck to observing and using the power of mental projections, as in judgments and guesses, to figure it out instead. So I latch onto someone who I find incredibly fascinating, who I feel some type of connection towards, which is usually a very magnetizing man with a kind heart, with just a drizzle of the devil in him. I then determine his husband-worthiness based on my observations. At the same time, I end up confounding reality and fantasy by daydreaming about what I wish he would be. Kindness and respect towards me are the greatest factors in my latching on to a man, as with one bad encounter, I can turn on him like a rabid dog. Why? I'm a shy person. My encounters with men are few and far between. I analyze each encounter accordingly, and like with any human, the bad usually takes precedent over the good, though I certainly can go to extremes with overgratitude for one kindness done for me too. But there's nothing substantial to be gathered from very few encounters, particularly if I don't do a lot of the talking or engage in the interaction in any meaningful way. The idol can very easily fall off the shelf and break. But like any good historian, history was one of my favorite subjects, I preserve and protect the peace as much as I can until it's not my responsibility anymore, or something more precious comes along to divert my attention from it. I also can be as loyal as a dog, so I hold on to this mind man for years, as, unlike a dog, I don't play around. However, it wasn't until I looked back after a few of these encounters that I realized that I held on to these mind men, partly in fear that I would never find anyone else, partly in desperation to be loved by another, partly because I felt like I had so much love to give that I didn't want going to waste, and mainly because I wanted to feel special, loved, useful, needed, confident, and competent. I just obviously went about it the wrong way. It's not like I was completely mystified either. I usually know the answer. I just stuff it down and out of sight so that I don't have to deal with it, particularly when it goes against my desires. I see what I want to see when I want to see it, until life forces me to see otherwise. Very often, when things were going well, I didn't need to daydream or escape mentally at all. Though sometimes, just for the hell of it, I would force myself to, which inevitably made my day go poorly, for I wasn't actually interacting with my day at all. Stress and procrastination were the main reasons I would retreat to seek refuge in my head, and I usually was joined by whoever was my current mind man of choice at the time. For me, love needs to last forever, which is one of the reasons that I would project my mind forward to see if I really wanted to be with that particular wax man or not. Over time, none of them passed this projection testing. Did you? It's unclear. Distance is said to make the heart grow fonder, but I find that after that strong feeling of initial fondness ends, your mind starts to forget enough to allow the scar to fade, and the majority of the fondness is over. With you, I'm not sure. I guess I cheated on you, but only mentally. The rated R or X versions of my daydreams didn't start until I was much older, but I still had other men in my mind's bed than just you, even some women too. But we'll get to that anomaly later. I'm the type of person who can get hot all over from just thinking, hearing, or seeing something. No touch involved. However, all the other wax bottle men would typically grow repulsive to me, even boring and predictable in some cases. They just fade away, only to be replaced by whoever came along to be my new obsession, my new crutch to hang on to, especially when things became rough and I wanted to forget. My go-to panacea for tough times and a surefire way to get me hot all over involved you, me, and a wall. The specific details would change, but the main scene always stayed the same. You come home from work, well dressed in a beautiful, crisp white shirt, because men look sexy in crisp white shirts, and you immediately place your briefcase on the floor. I'm near the door, ready to receive you. Your arms immediately open, and I jump into them as you shove me against the wall to the right of us, my legs tightly straddling your hips, your hand protecting the back of my head, both of us smiling like fools, laughs bubbling in our throats. One of your hands plays with my hair as the other lifts and caresses my legs. You brace my body upwards from my stomach and chest to reach your mouth as you masterfully use the wall to push us closer together. Never leaving your blazing eyes from my face, you patiently explore my body. My head leans back, enjoying your stare and touch. Once I look down and our eyes meet, that's when the clothes come off. In real life, you staring into my soul would probably make me self-conscious. But I love how in theory it's so intimate, deep, and sensually personal. I know that I sound like a pervert, because I am, and I accept this. Most people, if not all of them, are perverts, or have the capability of being perverts, so I'm not too concerned. It's probably healthier than it sounds. It's kind of funny though, how you aren't one of my wax bottle men. At least not fully. Essentially, these wax bottles always fit in the same mold. They were all of different colors in a sense, but all had the same flavor, and they all met with the same end. They got thrown away. I bit into the wax, and it tasted disgusting. Drinking out of those bottles wasn't worth it. Not for me anyway. I would say each of their names aloud to myself at one time or another too. Each name gave me a thrill. That is, until it didn't anymore. When I moved on from the other wax bottle men and threw them away, I would feel bad at first, but I'd move on pretty quickly for someone who held on so long. You were different. Your name still gives me a thrill. I do use the thought of you to sustain me. I use your beautiful face to hold on to get me through the darkness, just another one to keep the temptation of the noose away. I never tired of you though, even when I tried to. I have tried to, and failed utterly every time. Your stunning man-god face is always in my head. The butterflies you give me, your smoldering look, your deep voice, everything gives me chills and stiffens my resolve to see you. So you aren't even close to the same flavor as them, and you aren't made of artificial colors. Therefore, you aren't a wax bottle man. So what are you? I do realize that I may not know you enough to get sick of you, because let's face it, you're practically all in my head. But there's something deeper at work here, and I'm interested in actually getting to know you better, to find out how everything